I guess if you were to trade DeBrusk, which again is really the worst case scenario at this point, I know some people would love that. I do think that, definitely impacts things big time. If you were to trade him, it would have to be in a package for someone better, who is definitely, bettering you short term and long term. Because again, like, he does fit here, and he has fit here, and he's had success in the past year. And welcome into the Bruins Beat on CLNS Media. My name is Evan Marinofsky, and today I am joined by Conor Ryan. Conor, what's up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. As always, we're brought to you by FanDuel and HelloFresh, our two great partners. Today, Conor, on Monday, again, this is coming out Tuesday. We're recording Monday. Big day around Boston. It is the Bean Pot. Your school is in it. Your school is in it. Mine, not a part of the Bean Pot. That's okay. That's fine. Let the Boston schools do what they want to do. Have fun. I will bask in the beauty of Western Mass, the rolling hills. Did you see the tweet I retweeted? It was a picture of Shrek. I forget what part of the movie it was, but coming up
when he's walking a Duloc, and it's like, this is me walking to campus. I was like,
this is the UMass campus,
real.
And I was like, that's so realistic.
Yes.
It is true. It's like you go out in Western Mass, and it's just a lot of farms and rolling hills and this and that. And it's just like the Du Bois Library that's like 30 stories high in the middle, and you can see it from like every direction for miles. So,
and don't forget the top-rated on-campus food, I believe.
You can smell that from miles away. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can smell that from miles away. But tonight is the Bean Pot. Monday's the Bean Pot. Northeastern Harvard first, BU BC second. So it should be good.
I feel like this is like one of those photos that precede unfortunate events. Is like if BU gets absolutely smoked. Which they won't, but just in case. It would be really unfortunate, Evan.
It would be bad.
It'd be really unfortunate if someone was to clip that photo of like BU getting smoked by BC. It'd be really unfortunate. I know none of our fans would do that though. So we have classy, upstanding, highly college-educated fans who go to a great school like Boston University. So they would
they respect that they would never take us out of context or anything like that. No. Screenshot something. No, never.
Heavens,
ever.
No.
Of
course not.
It's not something they would ever do. If BU did lose 3 in a row though to BC,
it wouldn't be great, Evan. I got to tell you,
I'm
not trying to be dramatic. I'd be pretty fucking sad.
That would not be good for you or BU if that was the case. But I'm excited to see what happens. Unfortunate. There's part of me that's kind of disappointed we don't get BCBU in the final.
Should automatically be the case.
It kind of feels like it is. I know that Northeastern and Harvard, Northeastern's starting to find their game. Harvard's been struggling all year. They lost a ton. They're a very, very young team, so you got to give them props. But I would rather see BCBU in the final. But hey, what are you gonna do? Happens. Hopefully,
breaks.
The only thing is the thing with the Bean Pot is Harvard never really has much of a fan section. So
no,
if they're in the final, it's gonna be boring.
Yeah, exactly. It's never. They always mean well. Like you always have the few dedicated fans that show up. You're like, you know what? It's easy to root for Harvard, which is not usually the case for a up and coming underdog school institution like Harvard University. But you always kind of root for them a little bit, right? And then 25 fans show up, but you know what? They mean well.
They do. But I'm looking forward to it. Again, it already happened when you're listening to it, so you guys know what happened.
Go BU.
Bruins are back. Bruins are back in session. They kick off Tuesday night after being back from the All-Star break. The stars were out in the All-Star game. You had Justin Bieber with Jim Montgomery behind the bench, I thought was terrific.
Yes.
You had Tate McRae taking photos with Jeremy Swayman. I got to be honest, I did not know who Tate McRae was until the Bruins did their TikTok where they were lip-syncing to one of her songs. And I'd like to think I'm with the times. I'm up with the latest hip trends that the kids are talking about and liking. I didn't know who Tate McRae was until then. I do know who she is now. She seems cool. Her music's pretty good. I guess I'm a fan.
There you go. Yeah,
so,
I just learned about the gritty, Evan. So I'm still trying to catch up. So
you didn't know what the gritty was before?
No, I'm just doing it now. When you see me walk into the garden tonight, I'll just be grittying through.
You're grittying under the camera right now, just
Yes.
like, moving your arms and everything.
Desk is gonna
But
go
yeah,
flying. Anyway.
exactly. If only we were, if you only could see our full bodies on camera, we would be just grittying the whole time.
Yes.
Anyways, the Bruins are back, and Jake Debrusk on Sunday was asked about a contract extension because, again, you wrote about this for Boston.com. A decision has to be made at some point. You're either going to go into the offseason with him unsigned, or you're going to sign him, or you're going to trade him. You do have to figure something out there if you're the Bruins. And he said, quote, "It's one of those things that I hope it gets done. I have an agent for a reason. I've obviously been with this organization for my whole career. I feel like I know where I stand in this lineup. I feel like I know where I am with the guys in this room in the city as well. I think I'm more so open probably to longer term. I think everyone wants to be a Bruin for as long as they can. I don't know exactly. I don't have a number that I'm exact on either side, honestly. I think he probably does have a number,
Yes.
but I get what he's doing. Where are you at with Debrusk and what they should do with him?"
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I know that he's a divisive player. I would say. I think you're either in like there's one or two camps you're in. You can't really toe the middle ground in terms of what kind of player he is. I still think when you look at where exactly his value is in terms of being a top 6 player, can be a 20 goal scorer, is really good two-way player, strong defensively. I don't know where you're going to get that value on the open market if you are going to move him. And I think that's kind of the worst case scenario for the Bruins. Again, worst case scenario, like you could get a very good first round pick, something like that back in return for him. That being said, when you look at the way this team is built, when you look at what could be a pretty promising cup run for this team, you don't want to move a guy who's a top 6 fixture, who's still on pace for 20 plus goals, contributes on the PK, does all those things. So if there is a spot available, ideally you'd like to keep him. But again, you have to be the Bruins. You have to be very realistic and take a pragmatic approach that if he's set on going to market, if you guys aren't able to agree to terms on something, in the middle ground, whether that's a long-term deal around maybe what, like, I know Steve Conrad, the Herald, mentioned like Owen Tippett's new contract. I don't know if he's going to get like Brendan Hagel money, which was $6.5 million, but if you can get a long-term deal, $5.56 million, and you lock him in long-term, I think you still have to do that if you're the Bruins. But if you can't bridge that gap, you have to kind of confront some pretty hard truths, right? Because I don't think this is a guy that, as valuable as to this current team, you also can't let him walk, right? This isn't like the Torrey Krug situation where, all right, we know he could walk, but he's still valuable to this current team when we have guys like Chara and Bergeron and Krejci. We can't just sell off. We can't be a soft seller at the deadline. So it's an interesting spot for the Bruins to be in. I think if they do move him, it's probably the maybe one of the worst case scenarios in terms of you're moving a really valuable asset you can't retain, obviously. But we'll see kind of what the conversations are. I think if you're the Bruins, before you talk about what they add to the deadline, what they're targeting, you got to figure out what the clarity is with DeBrusk's future before you do any of those steps moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before, with them being first in the East, or first in the Atlantic, and I think they're still first in the East.
Yeah,
it's hard to justify dealing off DeBrusk for like picks, right? Like, and I said this throughout the whole year of he could get you legitimate picks in return, which you need. Which again, like I'm not walking that back. I just think they've played themselves into the point where they are contending for the cup. Now, where he fits in, I guess in some ways, you look like Kuzmenko going for Lindholm, but that still took like a first and a top prospect and all this, all that stuff. I guess if you were to trade DeBrusk, which again is really the worst case scenario at this point, I know some people would love that. I do think that, definitely impacts things big time. If you were to trade him, it would have to be in a package for someone better, who is definitely, bettering you short-term and long-term, because again, like he does fit here and he has fit here and he's had success in the past here. And you look at like, I saw in your story, Jay Fresh's card on DeBrusk. I think he's in the 90th percentile for all players. Like the production hasn't been there at all times, but the consistent two-way, impactful play kind of has. And again, that's not worth $7 million a season. We've said that over and over this year, But at the same time, there is value to that. And if at the very worst, you're going to get a guy who's contributing in small ways, but still can get you as a floor 20 goals, 45 points. Again, he should be doing better than that. I'm not justifying that, but maybe you do sign him to a $5.5-6 million a year deal that's long term, knowing that's what you're going to get throughout the entirety of it. Because as you said, where else are you going to find a top 6 winger who could potentially get you 30 goals and have the impact that Debrusk has had? I don't know. I don't know if you're getting that in a trade. Like, I don't know if you're getting that. You're definitely not getting that on the open market. So I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I think if they're going to keep him, which I think at this point, unless a big deal opens up where you can deal him and you're better and you're not giving up a first-round pick, which, again, I don't know what world that exists in, you probably do have to re-sign him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's probably the best case scenario for all parties involved. Again, if the Bruins sign him for 8 years at $8 million, then you're like, oh okay, maybe
then that's bad. We can agree on that.
Right. But I agree with what you said, that like if a bigger deal comes across where he's a headline piece of something, and again I don't know what a hypothetical one. If let's say you get a top 4 guy with term, like I don't know, fucking like Hannafin or something like that, where you sign him to an extension, you have a top 4 guy. Maybe you weigh that, especially if DeBrusk wants to go to market. You're making the most of an asset that you're not going to have going forward. Again, if he's set on going to market and you have to move him for a first round pick or get some returns, I guess you have to do that. But again, I could see if the Bruins hit the point where they have to move him for an asset because he wants to go to free agency. I'm sure you'll get a lot of people being like, oh, just put up Merkulov, put up Lysell, they're ready. And it's like, I understand like the fact that you have these younger players who maybe have a high ceiling offensively, but as you said, there's few guys in like DeBrusk where, yes, we know he's a very up and down scorer in terms of, you can't maybe it's not good to just go into the year expecting 30 goals. I think it's safe to assume he'll get you around 20 a year, but how steady he is defensively, how much he's, hasn't really fallen into Montgomery's doghouse this year. He's still averaging like 17 minutes of ice time per game.
Yeah.
If you're going into this year or you're moving on from Nebraska and you're putting in a guy like Lysell or Merkulov, one, they're not going to be trusted in that same amount of time. They're not getting those PK reps.
Not even close. That's Montgomery's underused them all year when they come up.
And again, if you hit free agency, yes, the Bruins have cap space and you'd have more if you're not signing a guy like DeBrusk, but which winger is out there that can give you, 20 plus goals plus that really safe floor of a really strong defensive player? That's where the issue is. Like, if you have to move him, so be it. That's the way the market dictates things. It'd be unfortunate, but I just can't see a contingency plan where the Bruins should be looking at, selling off DeBrusk as a top option right now.
And again, I'm even looking at free agency of like who's going to be available this offseason. And I don't find anyone that fits his role, where you can get him for less money. I just don't think there is. You have the cap space. It's not going to kill you. The cap's going to continue to move up. And again, like if they, let's say they get DeBrusk at, 6 years at $5.5-6 million, like I don't think that's awful. There are going to be people who say that's an overpay, that's not worth it. But I just think for what he can provide and what he, what his role is and what it can be, I just think the floor is good enough to justify the ceiling. And that's a great quote, by the way. I think we got to start using that more. The floor is good enough to justify the ceiling. I think that works in DeBrusk's case. It adds up. The walls push it up, and it works.
Yes,
it all makes sense. Speaking of things that make sense, our friends over at FanDuel, Connor, the Super Bowl is on. We're on the verge of the Super Bowl, and there's no better place to make the Super Bowl more fun than FanDuel.
Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today, and you get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/Boston to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
So anyways, Jake Debrusk, obviously divisive among fans. I get that. But I just, in terms of a trade, like, I don't know. like if you dealt him for picks right now, right? Like if you went out and again, he's worth a first. The way the trade deadline, Sean Monahan got a first round pick. Jake DeBrusk could get you a first round pick. The problem is you're probably dealing him to another playoff team. You're hurting your chances because he's helped you this year. I know his scoring has not always been there, but he's helped you. You're hurting your chances. I don't know how you make it work where you add to your team. Like, I don't know what deal you're making. Like, I mean, the Penguins aren't giving you Jake Gensel, and it would take more than DeBrusk to get Gensel, so that's not going to work. So again, I don't know what situation you trade him in, unless Don Sweeney comes out and says, look, we're going to, we dealt him for picks. We're cool with that. We're going to replace him internally. We'll get a couple depth options at the deadline, something like that. But other than that, I don't know. They're cup contenders now. That's the thing. Like, and they've moved themselves out of the, we're just going to, trade DeBrusk for picks. So you don't see them trading him for picks, do you?
No, I think the only scenario where they would is just if they can't bridge the gap in terms of a contract, right? Like, because again, I think the Bruins really have to take a long, and again, it's not set in stone. They could try to do the same thing where he goes to market, but they have the inside edge and they work things out. But if you're the Bruins, I think you just have to kind of steel yourself against that scenario playing out. Like, I think they view him as a long-term piece. They see where his value is, but if he's set on going to market, he's going to get 8 years at 6.5. He's going to get the Brendan Hagel contract, which a team probably will offer him that, especially if he ends the year on a high note or has a good playoff run. It's probably going to happen. So I think if you're the Bruins, the only, if you're trying to make the best out of a crappy situation, then yes, you can move him for picks. It's just as much as you're making the most out of an asset that maybe you won't have in a couple of months, still hurts your overall product both this year and the years ahead. Guy's 27. Like, ideally, you keep him here, and he should be a pretty productive top 6 guy for the next 4, 5, 6 years, right? So I don't think you want to move him unless it's the situation completely falls apart in terms of whatever the term, money, whatever that may be for a new contract.
And I mean, we always say, the contract will look better as time goes along because the cap will go up and this and that. It also could look better because as he's getting older and maturing as a player and as a person off the ice and his game is rounding out, the production could be more consistent as the years go along. There's also that end of it, right? Like, I think we always look at the negative of what if he's inconsistent for all 6 years? What if he, the production falls off and this and that and he gets unhappy here? Well, what about the other end of it where it's like, well, what if he finds that production, and what if it is consistent 30-goal seasons and that contract looks cheap because he's way better than the money that he's getting paid? So there is that element to it too. You got to look at the good and the bad. Sometimes people, they don't look at the good and the bad enough, but something that is always good, I can tell you, I can give a stamp of approval, always good, is our good friends over at HelloFresh. Quick break in the action to tell you about our delicious friends over at HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. A crazy schedule can make it easy to fall back into your dinner time recipe rut. But keep mealtime exciting with over 40 recipes to choose from every week. There's always something delicious to discover with HelloFresh. Turn to HelloFresh Market for yummy add-ons and enjoy the season's limited time fall flavors lineup. It's that time of year, right? Things get you in the mood, like apple cider cake with caramel sauce. All the ingredients come fresh, from the crushed tomatoes to the Italian chicken sausage mix to the Parmesan cheese. It's delicious, and I feel like a chef when I'm doing it. What's better than that? And this is a busy time of year for me with hockey starting up. I don't always have a ton of time, so this recipe makes it quick to enjoy something amazing. So join in on the fun. Go to HelloFresh.com/50Bruins and use code 50Bruins for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/50Bruins and use code 50Bruins for 50% off plus free shipping. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Now, back to the show. So, Connor, some breaking news just broke in the last minute or so. A picture has surfaced of Charlie McAvoy in a BC hat, and the quote he said, quote, He said, quote, I always wish I went to Boston College. It was my number one school, but I didn't get in, so I went to BU instead. Rooting for the Eagles tonight. Go Eagles. So
ChatGPT
wow.
did that. That's
Wow.
AI. That's not true.
That's crazy. He said
It's
that.
a deep fake.
I never expected that out of Charlie McAvoy. That was wow.
He's a well-educated person from Boston University. He would never say such a thing. He would never take that long commute all the way out to Newton.
No, he would never do that ever. He did 2 years at BU, right? Freshman and sophomore year, I think. He did 2 years.
Yes.
No, he lost a bet with John McClain about because the BCBU series. Thought that was funny. Hags tweeted that out. Anyways, Derek Forbort, some news out of practice on Monday. Derek Forbort, new injury, is going to be out for a little bit. This sets it a bigger thing. He's been dealing with injuries pretty much all season long. He's the only kind of big left shot, tough shutdown defenseman that they have, penalty kill specialist type guy, a guy that when the playoffs come around, you would like to have in the lineup. Does this increase their urgency with going out and getting not just a depth defenseman, but someone who could kind of fill Forbort's role?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think Forbort's the guy. You look at how strong he was, especially early on in this year. He's been pretty rusty since coming back from LTIR. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's dealing with a lot of really lingering injuries. And as you said, I don't think whatever he dealt with in training camp is completely healed. Now you add another injury on top of that. Add in the fact that he's at his best when he's like getting, he's blocking 5 or 6 shots a game, playing really taxing minutes. Not the most conducive way to ease back into a couple of injuries like that. So no. I do think that is something you have to look at if you're the Bruins. And again, what does that entail? Are you looking at a guy like Hanifin? Probably not, right? That's a legit top 4 guy, and that would include, as we said before, Debrusk and other assets going there. Is a guy like Jacob Middleton, who I believe Scott McLaughlin of WEI mentioned. Really good player, really good underlying numbers, big body, plays on the PK. Again, he's a guy who's maybe been under the radar, but has really good numbers, has another year of control, so that's going to be pricey in terms of what it's going to take to get a guy like him. So maybe it's, maybe not a depth defenseman, but if it's a guy like Ilya Labushkin, who's over on the West Coast now, played in Buffalo before, physical guy, probably better suited for a third pairing role. Maybe look more at those players. I mentioned this on my last podcast with Ty, where it was like, all right, they do have a guy like Parker Weatherspoon who's really impressed, but it's also asking a lot for a guy to be like a pleasant surprise to being a guy who's playing 18 minutes a night in the plaaffs. And
yes, agree. I completely agree.
And if you think he is, which again, I haven't seen anything to steer away from the assertion that he could be ready for that role, got to play him in these upcoming games, right? Like it's all good when you play him against, a team like Ottawa, but let's see how he does against a team like Vancouver. Let's see how he does against a team like Tampa Bay coming up. Like, let's see what exactly he can do, because he has exceeded expectations, Weatherspoon, but if he's going to be in a featured role in this lineup in crunch time, not going to be easy. You're going to be killing a lot of penalties, blocking shots, all that kind of stuff. So they do have options there with a guy like Weatherspoon, but I do think you have to kind of leave no stone unturned. And if it's maybe a third pairing regular guy in the lineup, maybe that's where you focus your attention this trade deadline instead of maybe like a bottom 6 physical winger or something like that.
Yeah, as this Forbort stuff continues to sort of unravel as the season's gone along, I think it does raise the need for someone who could fit that role. I agree with you on Weatherspoon. I mean, he's been great in the times that he's up here, but I think you're a better team going into the playoffs when he's your 7th defenseman, and someone that, if we need him in a pinch, he can step in and we know what we're going to get, instead of, hey, he's going to be the third pairing guy with Kevin Shattenkirk, and that's that. I think it's a much different story when that's the case. So I agree with you. I think Middleton makes sense. But, as you said, everyone's more expensive at the deadline. And, it's rare that you find kind of a diamond in the rough, player who nobody else is after, because it's, everybody's got analytics departments, everybody's got scouting teams, teams notice other teams, hidden gems, and that drives the price up. So I would rather they not spend like a first on a third pairing defenseman. But I agree with you. I think it also should be a depth third pairing guy rather than like Noah Hanifin, where it's like, that's going to cost a lot. A lot of teams are going to be in on him. I'm curious to see where he ends up. Local guy, good top 4 left shot defensemen. So we'll see what happens there. I think that's one of the big storylines to watch in the second half is like what do they do on D at the deadline? Because I think, with Forbort's injuries, they're starting to need it. Anyways, Connor, that's been this episode of Bruins Beat. What can the people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we're going to have you covered every step of the way this year, whether it's game recaps, features, breakdowns, looking ahead at the deadline, a few possible trade targets. We'll dive into all that stuff over at Boston.com, so you can read all of my stuff over there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Connor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Connor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.